success can be defined so many ways. Um, the way that I define success is to like actually be able to live life on your terms, where you have complete ownership of your art, you have complete control of how you generate an income, and really just not really like compromising your own integrity or values for what you actually want, right? So if you can focus on how to create a culture, right? Like how to create like how to attract your fans that are in it not just for the music but for the culture that you're building, then I think that truly defines success as we continue to move in the creators economy.
Well, welcome to the podcast today. I have a special guest with me, Isabella de Bedoya. She has a very unique story. She started out, I guess, her professional career as a private chef, and ended up in Beverly Hills, and ended up in just kind of going down a very unique music path that is not the normal story that you'd hear from most people. But Isabella, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, Jason, for having me.
Well, tell us, we got to start out. I love food. So tell us a little bit about this whole private chef. Give us your story of, you grew up and your parents probably told you don't do music, and we get all kinds of advice there, but how in the world did you end up doing music as a private chef?
Yeah, so it's really a very like creative story. So when I graduated college, I couldn't find a job anywhere, and it was just like I think it's like my rock bottom part, because I couldn't find a job anywhere. I was fresh out of college. I had like 50K in student loan debt, and it was like impossible. Like either I was underqualified or too qualified to work at like local restaurants. So one day my family was just like, "Hey, what if you?" So I actually one night I ended up making dinner for my family, and they were just like, "Hey, what if you actually post this in like a Facebook group where like the locals are here, right?" So I was like, "Sure, I'll post this like sauce that I made in a Facebook group," and like without even like thinking too much about it, all these people started like placing in all these like pre-orders, and I was just like, whoa, what is happening? So I was literally so broke that I couldn't even afford like all the materials to even put it together. So I asked my mom to lend me like $20. Next day I flipped it to like $125. And everywhere that I went, people asked me, "Do you do catering? Do you offer like meal plan service?" And everything, I was like, yeah, yeah. I would run home, make the menu, send it out. And in one week, I turned this like really awful scenario into like, I think it was like $2,500 or something like that. And I kept doing that consistently, just selling, like essentially just selling meal prep on Facebook groups. And a family in Beverly Hills found me, and I had like 2 weeks to pack up my life in South Florida and become a live-in private chef in their house.
And so you went from Florida of just trying to make ends meet to going to be a private chef in some fancy family there, and now you're coaching. I know you've coached well over 300 musicians and artists and in the music world. So how do we get from private chef? Give us that story now.
Yeah, so from there, the second that I touched down to LA, I knew that I wanted to have a career in music. I didn't know exactly what I would do or anything like that. So this is back when like Facebook events were like actually a thing. So I just started going through Facebook events, and every single night I would find something in the entertainment industry and I would go to it, and I would just show up. Every like whatever it was, I would show up, and I would network like crazy. So I ended up becoming an A&R for a label under Sony. It was called Trend F, and basically what I had to do now, the first thing that they taught us how to do was use social media to scout talent. And they taught us like the red flags, what to look for, what not to look for, like all these different things. And that's when I kind of started having this like epiphany, like for an artist to make it nowadays, it really boils down to social media. And this is like back in like 2016 or 2017. So social media is completely different now, but that's when I started getting this like epiphany, like, okay, artists need to get really good at social media. They need to get really good at digital marketing. And that's when I started realizing, I went through like all these different career paths, and I realized that the best way to help artists is to actually help them build their personal brand on social media.
Interesting one. And tell me, I mean, from a music standpoint, you're not necessarily a big musician yourself. So what was it that drew you to music as a career?
No, this is a really good question. I've always loved music. Like even back in high school, I would be the person making CDs for all my friends. And when I was in high school, this is like before Spotify. So like music, like you literally had to go out of your way to find like unreleased music. And somehow I always found music that would later on end up being played on the radio. And my friends would always be like so shocked, like, how did you do that? How do you have that ear for the music? And I was just like, I don't know, it came natural to me. So I didn't really realize that that was like a skill, right? Like until later on. But I've always loved working with talent. I've always loved finding music, and I'm not a big musician myself, but I do have like musician tendencies, right? Like I've done my due diligence in like learning production and stuff like that, and I know this is something that I want to explore down the path. But right now, I'm just more focused on building fame hackers and building the community.
Got it. So Fame Hackers, you mentioned earlier that you were an A&R for under Sony. So for those that don't know what an A&R is, explain what an A&R, or explain what that role maybe was.
Yeah, so I know for everyone, they have like different experiences. For the experience that I had, I basically had to scout talent, find talent that was like somewhat, they looked like they were putting in the part, their effort, they had a solid brand and all that. And we would then bring them to the studio, and then based on wherever they were in their career, then it would be like more of an artist development, and then figuring out, if they're actually going to get signed or whatever the case is. So generally speaking, though, an artist is A&R is basically the middleman between the label and the artist. And I know the role has changed so much since back then, and I know it continues to change. So it was a really cool experience, and that's pretty much what made me understand how to actually help an artist better, what to focus on.
So for those that are new to the business, A&R stands for what?
Artist and repertoire.
Got it. Okay, it's perfect. So really, you were just kind of coaching and helping find these individuals to help them be successful. And so the whole premise of how we started this podcast was to try and help people recognize, because musicians of all kinds. I mean, I know for me growing up, I never looked at music as a career. It was just one of those that, okay, you need to go get a real job, and then music is something you can do in your spare time or for fun. And the more you get into the music business, the more you realize, oh my gosh, there's all these like weird types of things you can do with music. So what advice would you have, or did you have ever, I guess, did your parents ever tell you, hey, music is a bad idea, for one? And then do you have any advice of what somebody that's thinking about a music career should maybe do to kind of explore that world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole reason why we started Fame Hackers was to like kind of eliminate that whole narrative. My parents, of course, they have the best intentions, they're very supportive, but they also didn't see how you could make a living with music, right? So very similar, my parents were like, go to med school or do whatever, but just don't do the music side. And nowadays we are like in such a beautiful period of history and period of life, because we can actually monetize our passions. So as long as we actually know how to create a personal brand on social media and create an offer that the people that follow you are going to be interested in purchasing, then you can really monetize anything that you do nowadays. It's not like it used to be before, where you had to be signed, like discovered and signed. Now you can actually make a lot of money, not from the music itself, but from like music, like related offers to your music, to your brand, to your artist culture and stuff like that.
Got it. And as you've worked with all of these artists over the years now, what would you say? What would you say defines success for somebody who really feels like they've found that happiness and fulfillment in whatever they're doing with their art?
Yeah, I mean, success can be defined so many ways. Um, the way that I define success is to like actually be able to live life on your terms, where you have complete ownership of your art, you have complete control of how you generate an income, and really just not really like compromising your own integrity or values for what you actually want, right? So if you can focus on how to create a culture, right? Like how to create like how to attract your fans that are in it, not just for the music, but for the culture that you're building, then I think that truly defines success as we continue to move in the creators economy.
Interesting. And if you've got that younger musician, or even let's say you got a brand new artist that comes on with you and starts working with you, what are some of the things that you do with those people, or just give us an idea of what it would maybe look like when they come in and they work with you?
Yeah, the very first step, very first step is, well, it's actually two. First is figure out the messaging, like what is the messaging behind the lyrics, the stories, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then the second part is actually figure out what kind of content can be created or documented around that. If we focus on the subjectivity of the music, then we can actually amplify the message a lot bigger than just like focusing on like the track itself. Because generally speaking, listeners, they don't really care about they care about the producer once the producer's big. They don't really care about what DAW you're using. They don't really care about your plugins, right? Listeners just want to figure out something that sounds cool, that they relate to, right? Subjectivity. And then who actually created it, the actual person.
Got it. And what is it usually that you feel like connects with, for those artists? Have you got any examples of anybody you've helped that you're like, okay, that was we need to do that again? What's some examples?
Yeah, so it's been a few. So for example, like let's say that your music, I'm working with this artist, for example, his whole brand, his whole vibe is all about like meaningful music, right? Positive music, meaningful music. So when it comes down to like creating an experience or anything like that, it's going to be focused around like positivity and bringing in people that are actually looking for more positive outlets, positive communities and stuff like that. So like a digital offer, the album, for example, is called Dream Big. So the digital offer is not just a song, but it's like an affirmations booklet that goes with it. He goes on a lot of hiking trails and stuff like that. So there's a booklet with all these pictures from the hiking trails and then like a journal prompt and a journal entry. So it's targeting those people that are actually into positivity and finding more like mindfulness in their life. So yeah, it's pretty much like, when you create in marketing, it's like called the emotional triggers, right? The pain points, pleasure points. When you can focus on what those are for the actual music, then you can really create like a bigger brand around it.
Got it. What would you say some of the biggest mistakes that you see these artists just in general make when, there's a lot of independent artists, they're trying their best. They put their song or two out there, or multiple songs even. And sometimes you just don't get traction. And it's frustrating as artists. I mean, I think it's happened to everybody, even the most successful people, but yeah. What are some of those common mistakes you see happen out there as a coach?
It's a really good question. I think the most common mistake is, I have a couple. First one is when you say, check out new song out now, check it out. You're not really giving any kind of hint as to why people should check out that song. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is when you ask an artist, what's your music is about? Like, what is your music about? They usually will say, oh, it's about life experience. Again, that doesn't say, because your life experience is completely different than the next person. So when having a little bit more clarity on what exactly that means, then you're going to be able to attract more people. Like instead of let's say that you are writing music about, I don't know, like heartbreak, right? So like Taylor Swift, all her music is either about hopeless romantic or a heartbreak. And if you were to write a song where you're like talking about that, you could actually just say like, hey, if you just got dumped, I just wrote a song for you. Check it out. Now you're actually giving context. Now people actually want to like listen. So I think just having more clarity on that will help a lot more people.
Yeah, I think the stories. I've done a lot of these piano songs over the years. I'm actually I'm probably a bad example of what not to do. I just released a new album. As you're telling me this, I'm like, I should have done that better. But I've got almost a dozen songs in this book, and I've I tell stories about every one of them. So like for my piano playing people, but when it comes to releasing the stuff on iTunes, I've done a very poor job of sharing those stories. Sometimes, they're great songs, but then they don't get as much traction because, it's kind of like you get to that end of the row and then you just kind of stop and don't put the gas pedal down and finish getting up that hill and over the hump there. So
yeah, it's just a little shift in messaging goes a long way.
And I think the hard part is, I think as artists in general, I think we really enjoy that creation process. And from a marketing standpoint, 'cause I'm a marketer through and through, but there's so many musicians that just do not want to think about marketing,
Yep.
just, and there's so many people I've found that are just very, very so much more talented than me. And their stuff doesn't ever catch on, but it's because they haven't got that marketer hat, or aren't willing to try to do the marketing piece. So
Yeah.
when you run across artists like that, 'cause out of 300 people or 300 plus people that you've worked with, I'm sure you get all kinds of people, but there's probably more. It seems like more people don't want to do the marketing and just want to just pretend like that's a bad word, right? Or they're like, I don't want
Yep.
to sell my stuff. I don't want to market my stuff. I just want to be. So what advice do you have for those individuals? Do they need to hire somebody to do that? Is there some of it that you can't, that you'll fail if you, or it won't go as well if they, kind of neglect it? I mean, what do you recommend to those people?
Yeah, it's really a mindset shift. Because if you really think about it, even CEOs, even any kind of person that's going into business right now, if they're not shifting into the role of a creator, they're already getting left behind. So it's really challenging when someone's like, I just don't want to do it, because it should actually be like the opposite. We actually should be like extremely grateful that we live in a generation where, thanks to social media and marketing, we can do whatever we want. Like, people
Mhm.
can literally go and sell pink sauce on TikTok. Like, that's the trending thing right now. It's crazy. But it just goes to show that if you're willing to show up online and if you're willing to actually be authentic, raw, and vulnerable, then you're going to be able to attract the right people. It's not even about putting a facade. It's just more of like, it's like your responsibility to show up, because you never know. Your music could change the world. It can shift culture. It can heal people. It can prevent suicide. You never know what's going to happen on the other end. So really, it's just about like finding peace with it and understand that it's better this than waiting to get discovered and then having to sign with a record label.
But I think when you start thinking about marketing as really, how do I serve these people? I mean, you have
Yeah.
this music and you want to. I think everybody who's a creator wants to help somebody, yes, at some level. I mean, that seems to be a very common thing that exists. But I think when you start looking at it like, okay, how do I better serve? And if I, and you almost feel like, okay, I'm doing a disservice or hurting these people if I
Yeah.
don't take the effort to share or help that person. I think you kind of look at marketing a little bit different way. And I think some of the, when you talk about being authentic and vulnerable, when you're serving somebody and trying to help, I mean, you've got it, that authentic, that real person does come out, I think, as you're coming up with content, or if somebody's doing a video, or just kind of speaking from the heart. It's there, it's real. And I
Yeah.
don't think it can be faked. It's really hard to fake it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, like you said, right, if you have like the good intentions, then it really, if you come from a place of service, then I think that can definitely empower people to show up. But no, this is one of the most challenging things that happens across the board, not just for musicians, but for all sorts of creators and entrepreneurs. It's a
Right.
really tough hill.
I remember a book from years ago that it was kind of a training about being a great leader. You talked about being a CEO, but I was talking about being a servant leader. And some of your best leaders are the ones that they serve you. They're there to serve and help and make a huge difference. And so I think, as a musician or an artist, or whatever you are in life, I think being willing to serve and help others just goes so far. I've been I've been in places where, you know, actually, so I have a company. I don't know if you knew this or not, but I have a company down in Costa Rica. It's Amazing Vacations. We started as a humanitarian project to help some amazing guides to be able to. They do kind of mastermind trips and group trips, but as I go down there, so I'm one of the founders, and so I guess that's a big deal. But when we're there, I'll be in jungle camp, and all of the guides are there taking care of all of the people that are on these trips with us. And what's been so fun is, and they just did not expect this. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's just who I am, but I think it's gone so far from a leadership standpoint. But we're cooking dinner in the middle of this jungle camp. I'm up there cutting food and doing the dishes. So I intentionally will make sure we go around and we pour drinks for people, or I'll grab a couple of my people from our group, and they think, oh, we're taking care of the big boss, and we're the ones trying to serve and do the dishes for them, and they're like, well, this never happens, what's going on, this is crazy, right?
Yeah. That's awesome.
But I think it's one of those where I think as an artist, as I apply kind of those principles, that's been in that business type of setting. But those individuals, when they realize that you look at them and you look at them as the important thing. I mean, that they're what matters.
Yeah.
I'm just as they're more important than the person. And even so with the artist, if you're trying to communicate with your people and you help your listeners realize, you know what, I'm doing this for you. This is to help you, and it's not so much about that communication where you hear that artist that's like me. The narrative just changes, and I think it's I bet you'd be very hard pressed to find very successful artists out there that just want to talk about them, right? In a positive way. So
Yeah.
I mean, if you have any other examples, I guess you've probably just got tons of stories. Maybe share one other story of an artist that's had success. I mean, or that you would say you've been able to really make an impact for him, and what you think the difference maker was for him.
Yeah. So not so much on the music fan experience side, but on the other side of the coin, also selling your music skills. This is another thing that's been really impactful. So there's an artist that he's super talented, like amazing singer, very amazing like producer and everything. And I think over the pandemic, he started discovering like all these like really creative ways to do like vocal productions, and it just started catching up. Like all his people in his network always call him, and they're like big names in the industry. They always call him for advice. So I helped him turn it into like an actual coaching program, where the whole premise behind everything we do is like this 3-part framework, which is like content strategy, launch a virtual event or a fan experience, and then figure out what your main upsell offer, like something that's going to be high ticket. Um, so for him, it was like I think it was a 4 or 5 day vocal mindset experience, and then creative vocal mindset, I think it was called. And then on the back end, he was able to sell this coaching for like $1,200 a person. And it was really cool because like in that 1 week, he was like, this is something that a lot of people already have skills to do. And we don't like, we have a lot of people in our network, and there's a lot of artists coming into the industry. So a lot of people could actually turn this into a service. But yeah, on his very first launch, he had like, even though it was a small turnout, I think he made like around $2,200 or something total. And then he just had someone re-sign. So that was really cool because he has like monthly recurring revenue coming in from it. But yeah, I think if you have a skill, like if you know how to produce, if you know how to write songs, if you know how to coach someone to finish a song, these are all skills that people you can monetize right now. And it doesn't have to be like to 1,000 people. Even if it's to 5 people, that will change your life and your income.
I love the fact that it's just so fun to see people make it in so many different directions with music, and I think the more we can help people realize, look, you don't have to, there's really no traditional path when it comes to a career, or especially a career in the music industry. It's one of those where I think those that want to do it and are hungry, just keep working at it. You said it earlier, keep working at it, and those opportunities will come up if you really put in the time and really want to go for it. So thanks so much for taking time to chat with us today. And if people want to find more stuff about you or the Fame Hackers, or they're looking for a coach, or just want to find out what does that look like, where should they go to get more information?
Yeah, all the socials are at the Fame Hackers websites, thefamehackers.com, and my personal Instagram is Izzword, IZZWORD.
Awesome. We'll get some links from you. We'll put those in the show notes as well, so it's easy to find them. But I'm sure you've got several things that are like free giveaways or whatever to bring people in. So definitely if you're looking for a coach or looking for some tips on how to do some, especially in the social media side, Isabella is one that can. She's amazing at that. So check her out. Jason. All right. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. We'll see you.